Trump and why we must do it again. He joins us tonight. So, Charlie, what do you think impeachment, taking 3 steps back, is actually about?
Well, I think without a doubt, it is exactly as you just laid it out there. It is the attempt by the government first, deep state, whatever you want to call it. They will stop at absolutely nothing to remove this president, because this president, as you rightly point out, represents what the actual voters want. I have all the sympathy in the world for our Kurdish allies who have fought alongside us for a long time. All the sympathy in the world for them, but it does not matter. Voters are still in charge.
That's right.
And that's what Donald Trump understands, and that's why he is carrying out that agenda that got him elected, however unpopular it may be in the State Department or wherever.
In the State Department. So that's kind of it. I mean, you've been here an awfully long time in Washington covering the news here. When you see 2 witnesses, and I give all of these people the benefit of the doubt, I'm not saying that they're bad people, but they have deeply held beliefs about America's posture toward Ukraine and Russia. And when you hear them say out loud, without any shame at all, this is our policy, this is our position, you can't change that, what does that tell you about their understanding of democracy?
It's completely backwards. And of course, they do, as you point out, they absolutely do believe this. And they believe that the survival of America depends on upholding their twisted view of foreign policy. But again, it does not matter. And it is why we see, all of these witnesses, Donald Trump really sort of called their bluff when this whole thing began, after we'd been through all these other supposed high crimes involving Russia collusion, all this other nonsense that never panned out. He really called their bluff when they decided to go with this Ukraine call by releasing the transcript, or the closest thing we have to the transcript of the call. So now Americans can go and look for themselves and see whether there was a high crime here. But what all we're seeing now are all of these weird, they're not eyewitnesses, they're hearsay witnesses, or they're opinion witnesses. And everybody wants to know what John Bolton thinks of the call that Donald Trump made with the president of Ukraine. Well, that doesn't change the facts of anything. All that is John Bolton's opinion of it. And sure, I'll be interested to hear what John Bolton's opinion of it is if he does testify. But that does not change the facts. The facts have been released in the transcript of the phone call,
right.
And that's the most important thing that matters here. But these people, they don't care about the facts. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the fact that they find Donald Trump so appalling because he ran an election on promising to get out of situations like this, find alliances in places like Russia to kill people like that horrid animal that we killed or who blessedly killed himself along with his 3 children over the weekend with the help of Russia. And when this all came out, what did Democrats do? What did they complain about? They complained that they weren't informed about it before the raid. And furthermore, they complain about it that Donald Trump did advise the Russians, because he had to advise the Russians because we were flying through airspace controlled by the Russians. And so they're complaining that there was this coordination with Russia. And why are they doing that? Because they're going back to this ridiculous canard about how there's collusion between Trump and Russia somehow.
Well, if the collusion produces the death of Baghdadi, I think it's collusion.
I'm all in. Sign me up.
Charlie Hurt, great to see you tonight. Thank you.
Thanks.
Britt Hume is the senior political analyst here at Fox, not just for chronological reasons, but for reasons of wisdom, and we're always grateful to have him on. What's the point? So, as a political matter, do you think, Britt, is the point of impeachment? We're all laboring under the assumption that there will be no removal. So why do it?
Well, if a president impeached is a president to some extent tarnished,
yes,
and embarrassed.
Yes.
So if they can't get him removed, they can at least touch him up a bit in the hope that will contribute to his not being reelected. I think that's clearly what's in play here. And, the president clearly doesn't want this. He's said as much publicly. He didn't want to be impeached. No president would want to be impeached. So this is something they have the power to do. The question is whether they can do so and at the same time protect Democrats in the House whose districts were carried by Mr. Trump from being damaged politically by the impeachment, which will not go down well in those districts, one presumes, and whether then they have any hope of getting his impeachment affirmed, that is to say, by conviction in the Senate. Everybody says it's clear that the Senate will not do this. I think it's very unlikely the Senate would do this. After all, the president there are 53 Republicans in the Senate. The president can lose 19 of them, yes. 19, and still survive in office. So a lot of this is about trying to, A, protect those Democrats and still proceed with this impeachment inquiry, and about trying to win over some Republicans in the Senate. And, you know, a majority of them can go against him, and he still survives. So, I think the president is really in pretty good shape here. But think about this, Tucker. If you're a Republican in the Senate, and the impeachment article conforms to this conversation that's supposedly all about.
Yes.
It is, first of all, you have to kind of interpret it to conclude that he was demanding a quid pro quo. That is to say, he was going to withhold the aid unless and until the investigation was conducted. In the end, the aid was not withheld. And the investigation he supposedly was insisting upon was not undertaken. So it does leave you wondering whether, if you're a Republican senator, you're going to vote for a conviction of a man on that basis.
So what you're saying is, as a factual matter, as distinct from a matter of intent, nothing happened.
Right. I mean, this is another case. It reminds you a little bit of the Trump Tower meeting, the fabled Trump Tower meeting, in which Don Jr. expressed a desire and a willingness to receive dirt information from these Russian representatives who came to see him in Trump Tower. Nothing came of it. And it was considered to be kind of Exhibit A in the collusion case.
So he had impure thoughts, basically.
Oh, he did, and he said he was, when the possibility that he would receive such dirt was transmitted to him, he said, "I love it." Right? So that looks bad.
I've sent a lot of texts like that. Yes,
so the Mueller team investigates this for 2 years with all the investigative powers at the disposal of the federal government, and decided it didn't go anywhere, and that was the end of it. And so this, in effect, ended up not going anywhere. You know, and it is so like this president to kind of lay about himself and demanding this and demanding that and saying people are treasonous and saying they ought to be fired and they ought to go to jail and, and the rest of it. And a lot of it is just bluster. It's just bluster on his part. And, he's inexperienced in foreign affairs, so he's on the phone with some leader, and he has this rambling, kind of disconnected conversation in which he says, "You need to do me a favor," and then he mentions some things, and then later on he says, "We need to investigate and see about the Bidens." Well, maybe he meant that as a quid pro quo, maybe he didn't.
Well, what's so interesting is that at least a couple of the people, some of the most powerful testimony has come so far in the House from people who were legitimately shocked that the president might have a different policy position.
Oh, yeah. Well, one of the things you keep hearing is that one of the things the president was disturbing here was established American foreign policy. And that these diplomats and other officials, they represent that. As if the foreign policy is not supposed to be set by the president, which
as if it's not a democracy.
Right. Well, it certainly, and democracy or no democracy, we have this Constitution that reposes the power to set foreign policy in the president. So it is supposedly their job to carry out the policies that he sets, for better or for worse. Now, this may, I'm not going to get into whether this was a good policy or not.
Right. No, that's a separate question.
That's a separate question. But the fact that these guys didn't like it is not a matter that should be in play here.
They act like it's his job to carry out their views. Well, let's establish the pomposity. Yeah. My gosh. Brit Hume, thank you, as always. Well, the ISIS leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, is dead, and the credit may belong to some, true story, dirty underwear. We've got details on the underwear next.